Okay, hello everybody. We are officially live. Welcome to the first ever Big Bad Booty Bitches Book Club live show. Today we're going to be talking about Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Canas. And if you haven't read the book, that's totally cool. Feel free to pop into the chat and say hi. And we will warn you before we get into spoilers and everything. But today I have an awesome co-host, Michaela. So Michaela, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. My name is Michaela, and I have a YouTube channel too, just Michaela Reads. And I read like primarily horror thriller. So I was so excited for this one because this was one of my most anticipated releases. So I'm very excited to discuss and see what you thought of it.
Same. Yeah, I was super excited for this one too. Isabel Canas' writing is so awesome. Yes. And just the whole vampire vibe, I was like, okay, this needs to be like a priority for 2023. Right. So I'm super excited to chat about it with you too. Yeah. Also, I was just curious, what else have you been reading lately?
Let's see. I always need to look at my Goodreads because I am always reading like multiple books at the same time. I think the book I'm just most recently finished was I read Alice Feeney's newest thriller, Good Bad Girl. Yeah. And I really liked that. That was a 4-star for me. Gosh, my mind is blank past that. Like, I remember my most recent read, and past that, I got to look at Goodreads.
I agree with you. Yeah. I also just started reading The September House, yes. And it's really, really good. It's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. That's another like horror haunted house book. I was thinking about choosing it as a book club pick, but I didn't want to push it because it just came out this month, and I was like, well, I want people to be able to get their hands on it, but it is so good. It's so good.
I am so excited for that one. I am actually going to be reading that with Maddie from As Told by Maddie and Mary from Books with Tofukado. We are going to read that one together and discuss it, and I am so excited for The September House. Like, that premise sounds actually scary. Like, a lot of horror books, I feel like they don't actually scare me, but this one looks like it might actually do it. So I'm really excited to dive into it.
Yeah. I'm really liking it so far. I really like the whole haunted house vibe, like American Horror Story with the ghosts and everything. Oh my God, so good. It's so good. Yeah. I've also been reading Babel too.
Ooh, how is it?
It's really good. I wasn't gonna read it, but I was bored in a Phoenix airport and I saw a copy and I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna buy it and get into it on the plane. And now I'm really into it, actually. So yeah, it looked really intimidating, but once I started it, I was like, okay, this is kind of a cool dark academia vibe. I can roll with this.
See, that Babel to me does intimidate me a little bit because I know what I've seen it talked about. People say it's about language and like colonialism, and it feels to me like that seems like a very intimidating subject. But also, I just read my first R.F. Kuang book, Yellowface, and it was so good. Like, I loved it so much, and it makes me want to read more from her. I've also heard good things about the Poppy War series, and I need to read that.
Yeah, Babel is the first book of hers that I picked up, but I just bought Yellowface like last week. So I'm really excited to read that one too. That one looks really cool.
Yeah, it was so like, it's such a messy character storyline. So if you like really unlikable, messy characters, it was really interesting. Like, it kept my interest the whole time.
Yeah. I'm so excited. I'm so excited about like just getting into R.F. Kuang because everybody always raves about her books, and I just feel like I have FOMO. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Same.
That's gonna be awesome. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, it's just us chilling, and that's totally cool. But I think, do you want to give a little synopsis of Vampires of El Norte just to kick it off?
Definitely. Okay, so in this book, we are following a pair of childhood friends, and oh gosh, I'm so bad at giving synopsises, but
it's okay.
But the girl has like an accident that happens with her, like a sort of attack happens, and her friend presumes that she is dead, and he like abandons her, leaves town, goes off and like lives his life. And then one day he finds out that she's still alive, and it's basically them like reconnecting and rekindling their friendship and maybe something deeper, and also investigating this sort of like creature thing that's going on in the town. Like there's something weird going on in the town where people are getting killed and stuff like that. So
yeah, that was good. That was good. I think this is a hard book to like give a synopsis.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, for me, like going in, I thought it was going to be a lot more like horror, but the romance is such a key element to the story. And I'd heard people say that in reviews, but I didn't really fully understand until I got into it. And I was like, oh, okay. This is not what I thought, but I can vibe with that. That's cool.
Yes.
What were your like initial thoughts?
Okay, so initial thoughts were like exactly what you said. I was definitely expecting more horror. And have you read her debut, The Hacienda?
Yeah, I got like, oh my gosh, I got like part of the way through that, and then I had to return it to the library. So I never read the end, but like the whole first half, I was totally obsessed with it.
Yes. Okay. I loved The Hacienda. And that one is pretty similar to this in that it does have like a pretty strong romance subplot in it, but the horror aspect in it is really good. Like it's also kind of like a haunted house story. And it was really well done. And so going into this one, I was expecting similar vibes, but I really found that this one was like primarily a romance with just a tiny bit of like horror sprinkled into it. And I'm not the biggest romance reader. Like it has to be done pretty well for me. But I do have to say, I feel like Isabel Canas is a very good like romance writer. Like The Hacienda, I loved the romance that she did in that book. This one was not as well done in my opinion. And like we can get into it more, but I did have some problems with it. So I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I think we should get into spoilers and just do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't know. I liked the romance. I do feel like there's parts of this book that are like a little bit repetitive. I don't know. For me, I feel like it was like a 4-star. Like it didn't have that 5-star feeling, but I had fun. You know, it wasn't what I thought, but it was still a good time. Because I liked the banter between them, and I liked the moments when they were like sassy with each other and like teasing each other. That was fun. But yeah, there were parts where it was kind of repetitive with the guy Nestor talking about, you know, how he thought she was dead. And I'm like, brother, I know you thought that, but she's not. So let's go.
See, okay, so for me, I think the number one thing that like, well, there's a couple things, but one of the things about the romance that bugged me was I feel like this essentially boiled down to the miscommunication trope. Because like if he did not, I want to get into that too, but like if he didn't think that she was dead, he wouldn't have left, you know? So it's like him assuming something incorrectly. So it's miscommunication, but also why does he just book it and like leave town without ensuring that this girl he cares about so much is actually dead or figuring out if she's okay? Like he just leaves. And I don't know, that was kind of unbelievable to me.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And it's like, if she actually was dead, like, wouldn't he want to go to the funeral or whatever too? You know, have like closure on it before he just like bounced?
Right.
His family's still there too. And it's like, brother, you just like left your grandma and you were like, well, the girl I like died. So I guess I'm just going to skip town.
Yes. And there were times too where like I just felt like I kept comparing this book to The Hacienda, and like this book to me almost felt more young adult. Like when I was picturing these two characters in my head, I don't know why, but I kept picturing them as young adults. Like I don't know if their ages are stated, but I think at one point he says like it was 9 years later or something like that. So they're definitely adults.
Yeah, I think I did the math because like when he left, he was 13 when he left. And so he's like 22. Okay. So they're like early 20s, but it definitely did feel like younger, I think.
And I was trying to figure out like, why is that to me? Like, why is it reading young adult? And I was thinking maybe it's because of how Nina, the main character, the girl, she was constantly like seeking approval from her parents. And maybe that's to me what kept making me picture them as younger than they were. But I guess it also goes with like the historical part of it. Like a woman in that time period wouldn't have very much agency. So it makes sense why she kept seeking approval from her parents. But I don't know. It kept reading like young adult to me. And I just got such different vibes from the hacienda.
Yeah, I agree with that because the hacienda didn't feel young in that same way at all, which is kind of weird. And I think the hacienda was a lot more creepy too. And this one, maybe that was part of it too. It like felt younger because it wasn't as creepy as her first book.
I totally agree with that. Like the horror aspect was just so underutilized, and like I feel like this is a case of like I've been feeling this a lot lately in my reading where I pick up books that are marketed as horror and it feels like they are mismarketed. And like this book, for instance, so I struggled with my rating between a 3-star and a 2-star because genuinely I do feel like this book was very well written, and I think it just wasn't for me, but I can see a lot of people liking this one. And that's the thing. It's like if the publisher had marketed this correctly, you would get your correct audience going into it. But like I feel like I am not the correct audience for this. Like this is historical romance, you know, like the horror is so minuscule, like it could have been left out. But the fact that they published this during the fall, you know, and they literally titled the book The Vampires of El Norte, like, you know, like, it makes you think of something that like you're going to get more horror than you actually do. So it's just, I feel like it was mismarketed.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. I feel like sometimes with authors, it's like they market their second book the same as their first book, even if the genres are totally different. And it's like, these two things are not related. Like, don't do it the same way. It's not the same thing.
Right.
I don't know. And I understand that like both of the books, the Hacienda and this one, are both like set in Mexico and everything. Like the settings are similar, but it's not the same kind of story though.
It's
but
so
I don't know.
like,
yeah, I don't know. I think it worked for me because I really like historical romance too. So I think for me, I'm cool with either way, and I liked the characters, and it was a fun time. But I definitely think she could have done more with the vampire element, because I feel like in this one, the vampires and the war that's going on are kind of like on equal footing. But it doesn't really, it's not marketed that way as like a historical romance, like war setting kind of a book.
Yes. Right. Yeah, like you definitely do not get that from the marketing at all. Like I don't know, I just totally expected something different, but like that was why I really struggled with my rating, because initially I want to rate this a 3-star because I don't feel like it feels wrong to rate it at a 2-star, because if I look at like my Goodreads and some of the other books I've rated 2 stars, like this doesn't belong next to them, because this genuinely was very well written. Like she is so skilled at giving us very like atmospheric descriptions, and really like you can get a good picture of what's going on in your mind. So it was very well written, but I didn't like how much we focused on the two like main characters, and like him leaving, her holding that against him and having like so much resentment towards him. And so much of the narrative was focused on that. And I think I just wanted like a little bit more balance in the narrative, but that's just me. Like I can see, and I have seen like a lot of really positive ratings for this one. And it totally makes sense. Like I think a lot of people will love this one.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think for me, I wanted more of those moments that were really fun with them having the banter and the teasing and stuff, and less of them like repeating over and over about, you know, how Nana was so mad that he left her and she was so hurt and she like wasn't going to forgive him. I'm like, oh my God, just shut up and be together and then go fight the vampires. That's like what we're here for. You know what I'm saying? But yes. I did like the vampires because I thought that was kind of a different take on vampires.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like, you know, shiny Edward Cullen in the sun moment, you know, like these are actual like monsters, like creatures. It's not just like, you know, a hot pale guy with fangs, you know, like this is a different vibe. But it would have been cool to like lean into it more.
I really do feel like when this author does write horror and like does write spooky scenes. Like she's so successful at it and she does it so well. Like that's why I just want more of that. Like she's so good at it. And like there are scenes from the hacienda that I think of and can picture so vividly that actually like really scared me reading it. And so I just want her to like give me more of that because it's so good. But she's also really good at writing romance. So maybe she just wanted to lean more into that for this one, but I am excited to see what she does in the future and what path she'll kind of go down next. Because this was, so far, both books she's written have been kind of like historical fiction, gothic vibes. And I'd be interested to see like if she does something a little bit different next or if she kind of stays in that lane.
Yeah, I totally agree because I love her writing. It's like candy, you know, like you get into it and you're like, oh, I have to just binge this. This is amazing.
Right.
But it is interesting to see, like, is her next book gonna still be set in that like Mexico setting with the ranches and this, you know, hierarchy and the ranchos and everything, or is it going to be something completely different?
Right.
I don't know, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like my main thought of this one is I feel like I'm settling on a 2-star, but it's a high 2-star and it is a book that I would recommend to others if you like these sort of genres. But if you are expecting horror, like don't go into this just expecting horror because you're definitely going to be let down and you're going to go into this with like false expectations.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I think this is definitely more for people who like romance, but also like paranormal kind of elements and are cool with reading like spooky scenes. Because it is mostly romance and this whole exploration of the relationship between Nana and Nestor and all of the stuff that they've been through and them kind of coming back together and all that, which I liked, but it, you know, that's most of the book, which is cool. But it is interesting. I did really like the fight scenes though, when they're like fighting the vampires and stuff. That was cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. And like, that's just like we said, like she's so good at writing a very like descriptive scene where you can picture it so clearly what's going on. And it totally like keeps your interest. And so that's why maybe I will go with a 3. I don't know. I keep going back and forth on it because I really like this author. And I really enjoy her writing. So yeah, those parts that were for me and was what I wanted were so well done. And I totally like commend her for that. So yeah, there was definitely positives. Like this is not a bad book at all.
No, I agree. I just think it's a really good book that's just not marketed to the right folks.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Well, and it's also hard when like your first book is horror and then it's like that's what everybody knows you for and you only have one other novel. So it's like the people who are the most interested in her following stuff are mostly people who read the Hacienda and liked it, right?
Yeah, right.
So I don't know, maybe that's why they do it, because they're like, okay, we're just gonna keep feeding it to the people that we know already like her stuff. But
yeah, that's such a good point. Like that has to be hard for authors who really like have breakout success in a genre and they want to branch out and do something different. Like you're kind of starting over. And I feel like too, you'll have your original fans and audience kind of be mad at you because they wanted those same vibes, but you should be allowed to like evolve and try something different. So I totally respect that. And it has to totally be hard for an author to try to break out and like go to a different lane almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I don't know, I'm so impressed by Isabel Canas just in general, because she's also like getting her PhD and I think she just had like a baby in the last year too. And now she's got her second book that just came out. And I think she's already like drafting her third book too. I think I saw that online somewhere. So she's got a lot of things going on, you know?
Yeah,
she's really cool. And I love her writing. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
And I really liked, I don't know, I liked Nestor a lot as a character. Mm-hmm. I was kind of surprised by how much I liked him. Like I really liked, there's one scene where when they're on the road together and it's just them and they like escape from that whole battle and everything. And he like dislocates his shoulder and she's trying to like flirt with him and distract him so she can like pop his shoulder back in. Mm-hmm. That was really funny to have him be like, oh my God, I'm so wounded, but I'm so taken back by this one right now. He was so into it.
as much as I like don't often love reading romance, like I said, I feel like this is the one of the very few authors I really love the type of romance she writes. Like she crafts a character that I am so into. Like that is totally how I felt about the Hacienda. The romance between those two characters was so good. Like I genuinely loved it so much, and the ending crushed me. Like I know you said you didn't finish it, so I will not spoil it.
And I just need a copy though, so I'm gonna finish it.
I think you will really like it. It's just the ending like made me a little bit sad, but I don't know. She like totally. I appreciate how she writes her characters, and I really didn't find these two very annoying or anything like that. Just at times it felt like a bit young, but I really liked them, and yeah, I don't know. I think she did a really good job at writing both Nestor and Nena and convincing me of their connection.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. But it was also kind of one of those things where, you know, they're not being kept apart by their feelings as much as like the circumstances of like Nena being the daughter of the patron who's like the head of the rancho.
Right.
You know, it's almost like the forbidden romance because they're from different classes kind of thing.
Yes, that was like something I wrote in my notes, that if you like the like star-crossed lovers type of trope, like you will really like this. And like she totally played into that with the Hacienda too, where it's like star-crossed lovers, like these people cannot be together, but they really want to be, and you want them to be together. So it just builds tension, and you're like totally rooting for them to just be together already, you know?
I know. I feel like Isabel Canas does tension really, really well, like in between characters. And she also does like creepy scenes, like not the big climactic ones, but like the really subtle little things like leading up to it.
Yeah.
Like I remember at the beginning of the Hacienda, there's like a scene where there's like a rat on the front porch or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's still in my head. I was like, that is horrifying.
Right.
She does so well, where she's like hinting that like, it's gonna get bad, it's gonna get weird, and you're just like, ooh, I have the chills, I have the creeps, you know?
Yes. I feel like she is kind of like quiet horror almost. Like it's not in your face, like it's unsettling, but it's not like it's not going to keep you up at night. But I like those sort of like unsettling vibes. Like the whole time you're like, oh gosh, like nothing good is going to happen from this. Like it's like nothing good can come from this. So she does that really well, definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that kind of what makes you want to keep reading too. If you have like the tension with these characters, and then you have like these slow, like quiet horror moments, and you're like, I need to know what's gonna happen to these folks. Like, what is going on? I love that.
I wanted to ask you too, is there any books you feel like if you liked this book, you would also like this other book? Like, is there any recommendations you feel like are similar to this one?
That is such a good question.
Because
I think I'm trying to think. I think if you like the romance in here with the tension between them, there's a Tessa Dare that I think people would really like. Hold on. Oh my God, I'm gonna have to check my Goodreads. Oh my gosh, I can picture the cover in my head. It's the first one in one of Tessa Dare's historical romance series that I just read this year, but it was a few months ago.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's called Romancing the Duke by Tessa Dare.
Oh.
That one's so good. I gave that one 5 stars earlier this year. That one also has a couple where it's like they're kind of from like different classes and they probably shouldn't be together, but it's also got that element where it's like they have close proximity for a long time in like an isolated area, and they have a lot of really good banter and tension and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
That does sound good. Like, I feel like I couldn't think of anything that was really similar to this. And maybe that's just because I don't read a ton of historical fiction romance, but I liked that this felt really unique to me. Like, I feel like Isabel Canas like really kind of has her own little niche in the market. Like, not a lot of people write about this sort of like historical set in Mexico, like, and has these like unsettling elements. So I think that's so cool. Like, you won't read anything else totally similar to it.
Right, yeah. I think the only other thing I can think of that has kind of that vibe is like Mexican Gothic. That one has that vibe, but that has the whole other kind of like mushroom fungus horror element to it, which I also love. But that's very different from this, I think.
That is a book I need to read. Like, I really am trying to read that before the end of this year because everybody's read it and everybody always raves about it. And I want to know, like, what is this book about? Because it sounds so good. It sounds creepy. And it definitely, like, that is the only book that kind of gives me similar vibes of, like, set in Mexico, like historical fiction with unsettling, creepy elements to it. So I feel like because I love the Hacienda, I probably will really like Mexican Gothic.
Yeah, I think you would love that. And that one is much more horror. Like, that one is way creepier than like Vampires of El Norte and stuff. It definitely goes there. Yeah, I remember I read the end of that book and I was like, I am not okay. Oh my God.
I also love mushroom horror. Like, I don't know if you have heard of Ghost Eaters, but this has like mushroom horror in it that is so creepy and weird. Oh, also, what's the other one? Have you read T. Kingfisher's What Moves the Dead?
Yes, that was also really good.
Oh my God, like there is a scene in that book that just grossed me out so bad. Like, I now have a phobia of mushrooms. Like, it's terrible.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, you think that one's bad? Mexican Gothic is like, it's up here, dude.
Oh, geez.
It's so good though. And that one also has like a little romance element to it also, but it's really small. Like, it's horror, very creepy. That one also talks about a lot of different stuff. There's a lot of like racism stuff in there too. Man.
Yeah.
There's like layers to the onion of that. But if you like mushroom horror, you're gonna love that.
I'm so excited. Like, I would love to do a video eventually on mushroom horror book recommendations. I just haven't read enough yet, but every time, like, it is so creepy and unsettling to me. I don't know why, it's scary.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing because it seems like there's been more mushroom horror books lately. And whenever I read them, I love them. And I think it's so creepy, but it's also really like intelligent because the authors really do have to do like research on mushrooms to understand like how to explain it and everything. And I think it's really cool. Yeah. So I definitely would watch and would make a recommendations video about mushroom horror. Yes. But yeah, I think I remember a few months ago, there's a big bookstore in Portland, Oregon called Powell's. And they did like a whole display that was all like mushroom horror books.
Oh my gosh.
And so it was on their Instagram. And I remember I like saved the post and I was like, okay, maybe this could be like the start of some sort of video like that, where you could go and like read a bunch of those books and just see what you think.
Yeah. That's something too I love about horror is like there's so many different kinds of horror. Like, even the two Isabel Canas books, like the Hacienda is like haunted house, and then this one's more like creature feature. And maybe that's the other thing too. Like, I definitely lean towards preferring like haunted house, and creature feature is not as scary to me. I don't know why. Like, maybe we've just been oversaturated with vampires in the market where it doesn't really scare me anymore. But like you said, like, this was a different take on vampires, which I totally appreciated. And I feel like she did kind of figure out a way to make it more scary.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's also so many stories where like there's vampires, but they're not the villains, you know?
Yeah.
It's more because I've also read like paranormal romances where like one of the love interests is a vampire. So like I kind of have the same thing where like the vampires aren't like inherently creepy to me anymore. I'm like, okay, like that's just a chill thing, you know?
Right.
But I love the haunted house stories too. I've been trying to read more of them lately. Like, I also just bought Home Before Dark by Riley Sager too.
Oh, I like that one.
I'm excited to read that one. I just bought Pango because I was like, okay, I think it's time. Like, I really want to get into my like haunted house era, you know?
Yes. I feel like that's probably my favorite Riley Sager. Like, that being said, Riley Sager is not an author I totally love. Like, a lot of his books I don't like, but that is one of the few that I like really do think was very creepy and has a lot of really creepy elements to it, especially if you want a haunted house story. Like that definitely has spooky moments to it. And I like that one a lot.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into it. But that's kind of why I started with September House. And then I was like, okay, the next one I want to read is Home Before Dark after that. But I think you're going to love September House because it also has a lot of those really creepy elements where like the walls are bleeding and there's all these ghosts that pop up. And there's like the backstory on all of the ghosts and like who killed who and who is related to who and that stuff. I love that stuff. Yes.
Like even like that synopsis totally makes me think it's going to be really scary. Like the thing of the walls bleeding, like what? I'm just like imagining that and it totally creeps me out. So I cannot wait to start that. Do you know if it's her debut novel too? Like I think
so.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's good for her debut.
Yeah. It's going to be good. I know it.
I am super excited. I might have to come and pop into your guys' live show and watch that and stuff because it's really good. It's one of those ones that I think would be good to talk about with a group too. Once I started reading it, I was like, I should have saved this for book club, but I also want to read it right now. So, whatever.
Yes, and it's a perfect time of year too for like all these spooky books. Like this is the time. Give me all the haunted house, all the horror books. Like I love it.
Yes, I am totally right there too. I have like giant piles of like all the books I want to read this fall, and there's way too many that I want to read. But I'm like, whatever. I'm just gonna get through as many as I can get through.
Right. That's all you can do. Like same here. I have so many books that I want to read in October, and I'm like, there's no way. Like I'm trying to read both Dracula and Frankenstein in October, and they're both horror classics, so they're written. Yeah, it's like a classic, So I'm like, can I do this? We're gonna try.
That's a lot. Yeah. Just even Frankenstein by itself is really dense.
I've heard good things. Like I've had a lot of people saying it's really good and I'm gonna like it. So I hope I do.
Yeah, I think maybe if you listen to both of them on audio, that will help you get faster. I don't know. That's what I always did in school when I had to read classics and they were really long. I was like, okay, audiobook is the only way to go.
Audiobooks are so underrated, honestly. Like they are integral to my reading. Like it just helps you so much comprehend. And I don't know about you, but like I always have a hard time focusing like physically on the page, like when I'm reading a physical book. But audiobooks, for some reason, when somebody's talking to me, I can focus so much better. So I like to do a lot of hybrid reads too, where I listen and read together. Like that's what I'm doing with Dracula, and it's really helpful because the writing is so dense, but I hope I love it.
Yeah, I know. I do the same thing because sometimes I'll start with a physical book and then like that's what I did with Vampires of El Norte. Yeah. And then I don't know if it's because I get tired or what, but I get to points where I like read a sentence and it reminds me of some conversation I had with somebody and my brain goes off on this whole like thought spiral. And then when I get to the end of it, I come back and I'm like, what was I doing? And I'm like, oh, I was in the middle of this page because I was reading this book. But if I listen to the audio, I don't do that. I don't have like random thought spirals in the middle of reading.
Yes, I'm the same way. Like it's so weird how that happens. Like I don't know why. It's just like my brain goes off on a tangent and I'll reread the same sentence and I'm like not comprehending anything. But yeah, it's so weird with the audio. It totally focuses my brain. So audiobooks I feel like are underrated, and I hate how people think they're not real reading, like they're totally real reading.
Yeah, it's kind of just like when you were a kid and like somebody would read a book to you, like you still heard the story,
Yes.
It's not different.
Right.
It's like saying that if you're reading out loud to your kid, then they're not comprehending the story. Like that's not true. It's
right.
Like the same
and I heard too, like that is a very good thing for children too, to hear books out loud and have somebody reading it to them, because it helps them, I don't know, like learn or process language or something like that. Like there's just so many benefits to it. And I did actually listen to the Vampires of El Norte like the whole way through audio, and I really enjoyed the audio narrator. Like it had 2 narrators and they were both really good. I especially like the male narrator. Like I really liked his voice a lot. He did a really good job.
Yeah, I agree. Like partway through, I started doing like the tandem reading and listening to the audio and following along with the physical. And I agree. The the audio narrator for Nestor was really good.
Yeah.
It was really funny.
He almost too, like, I don't know why, he seems so much older than Nena's audio narrator. So for some reason, I kept picturing him as older and her as like a teenager, but that's just me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think she kind of came off as younger too, because she was a little bit more like, I don't know if petty is the word I want to use, but you know, where she was like, okay, like I obviously like this guy and I want to be with him, but I'm gonna like hold a grudge anyways, just because I want him to like feel the pain that I felt or whatever. And even after that scene where he was like crying and she was like, you don't need to cry. And he's like, no, I actually like really do. And it's like, okay, he's obviously hurting. Like, just talk it out, man, you know?
See, that was the other thing to me that really felt like a young adult book, was that to me felt so immature. Like her holding it against him so much that he left. And like, I get it. Like I would be hurt too, but like, don't hold it against him so much. Or like the whole book, it took her the whole book to like get over it. And you could tell she wanted to be with him, but then she would remember and be angry and resentful again. So it's like, just stop. I don't know.
I know. Well, and especially because it got to the point where it was like, okay, you understand why he thought you were dead, because she's a healer and she's like treating people who have the same thing. Yeah. And it's like, they look dead, you know?
Right.
He's a child. Like, there's no way that he would have been able to tell the difference. Plus, it was like with the time jump, like, yeah, 9 years ago, you didn't know as much about this whole like cysto thing where when the vampires bite you, you're like, you almost look like you're in rigor mortis, like you are dead. Right. So like, you know that because you've been healing people. So why are you holding it against him?
Right.
Like, what the hell?
That just felt like I said, the miscommunication trope almost. Like, you're building tension that does not need to be there. Or like, it's frustrating for the reader because you know they're going to end up together. So, but
I know. I think that stuff just went on like a little bit too long. It's like, okay, let's just get past it. Especially when it's like, okay, you guys already kissed, and now you're still going to be like, I'm mad. I'm still mad.
Right.
Like, no, you're not, ma'am. Like,
right.
Yeah, that is the immature stuff where it's like, okay, I get it that they're like in their early 20s, but like, especially Nestor has had like a lot of life experience, like working on all these different ranches and, you know, meeting different people and all these different jobs he's had and stuff. And it's like, dude, like we can move past it, you know?
Right. Yeah. And that was something too, like with Nena's character, I don't know, like, it seemed like she held it against him for leaving, and maybe because I don't know if she wanted to be able to leave too, or like have a bigger life outside of just the town that she lived in with her family. But that was another thing kind of that was a little bit exhausting, was that theme of, I mean, I know it's historical and like we said, like women from that time period didn't have as much agency, but it was exhausting to constantly have her family be like looking down on her, or not looking down on her, but like this whole women must have modesty sort of thing. And I know I'm like reading it from my perspective, from like present day, and like feeling frustrated by that. But that was the other thing too, I think kind of annoyed me, was feeling like I just wanted her to leave the town and be different. But I guess I can't say that because it's the time period. So I don't know.
I know. That is the hard thing with historical romance too, where there's sometimes certain things like that where you're like, I understand it's like a historical context thing, but that doesn't mean it has to go on for so long, you know? And she even talks about like moments when she and Nestor are just like in the middle of the desert, like trying to survive. And she was like looking in his little mirror that he used for like shaving, and she was like worried about her freckles. And like worried that her mom was going to say that she was like darker than she was when she left.
Yeah.
And she internalized that so much. Right. Like that whole fear that her mom was talking about, you know, like you have to stay pale or people aren't going to want to marry you and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I totally understand that too, because of the historical context and everything. But it was still like, you are trying to survive in the desert. There are vampires and a war going on. that you just escaped from, and you're worried about your freckles, I'd be like, girl, you're lucky you're still breathing. Freckles, I think that's like, down here, we don't care about your freckles. It's fine.
That's such a good point too. Like, yes, there are bigger issues, and that's like, I keep coming back to this, but like, that's again, like another example of this reading, like of me keep picturing the characters as maybe younger than they are. Cause I feel like maybe a younger character would care more about something like that, like their appearance in a life and death situation. Whereas an adult would be like, or if she had written the characters more mature, they wouldn't be caring about that. Like you said, you're in the desert and you're trying to survive. Like, who cares what you look like?
Exactly. That one was a lot for me. I was like, and Nestor he was like, yeah, whatever. He didn't call her out on it. I would have been like, shut up about your freckles, for real. We're running out of water. Like,
right.
Enough.
Yeah.
I'm like, girl, get some perspective. I know you still live with your parents and they're rich, but like, really though, that's a lot.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. I feel like they were kind of immature, the characters, and I don't know, like, they just didn't feel that way in the Hacienda to me at all. Like, they did not feel immature. Like, actually, that's really interesting because the main female character in that one, she was also kind of sheltered, like similar to Jenna. Like, she had just, I think this was her first husband. Like, her father died.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and then she marries somebody who's rich so she can leave home or something, because something like that. And so she also would be very sheltered and naive, but she didn't come off that way to me. Like, she was so smart and like proactive actually in the Hacienda, where she was like on her own, but she didn't feel powerless at all. Whereas Nena kind of did to me. Like, I don't feel like she felt like she had very much power at all.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I feel like the whole time I don't know. The other hard thing is that like Nestor knew what he wanted, like from the jump, you know, like he knew he wanted her, he wanted to save up to be able to buy his own house and have his whole ranch and like build the house. And, you know, he wanted that whole vision of like her on the porch with him. Yeah. And I remember that one point when he asked her, like, what do you want? And she just kind of like froze up and didn't say anything. It was kind of like, you know, he was already mature enough to know what he wanted in life, and she hadn't even gotten there, you know?
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, girl, you have a hot man in the desert. Why is this a hard choice? Like,
right. Like, I guess it feels somewhat realistic because, like we're saying, like she's sheltered and living with her parents. So how would she know what she wanted? But it's just kind of annoying for the reader when you're like, this is good for you, like accept it. And she's like, no, I'm going to be angry and not have that thing that's good for me. So.
Right. Well, and especially too, because it was like interfering with her work too. Because she was talking about how like the abuela was saying that her aura was like off. So she was having trouble healing people because she wasn't like healed herself. And it's like, you know, you have this whole thing with Nestor that's like holding you back in so many ways. Like, just work it out with him and then you're good to go. You know, whatever you want to do. Like, if you want to be a healer or you want to be with him or whatever, but at least you won't have this like black cloud hanging over you kind of thing, you know?
Right.
But, and then it was hard because there was sometimes where like most of the books, she was kind of like not as mature and like worrying about her freckles and all this stuff. But then in the fight scenes, there was times where she was protecting Nestor and she was stepping up and she was cutting off vampire heads with machetes. And I was like, whoa, this is a different Nena. Who is this? You know?
Right. Do you feel like there was enough like progression between that? Like, do you feel like it made sense for her character to have such a drastic shift from like almost being kind of immature to all of a sudden stepping up and like doing what needed to be done? Or do you feel like it was kind of like didn't make sense for her character to do that?
I don't know. I'm kind of like torn about it because I feel like it makes sense for her to want to protect Nestor in that way, like the same way that he does with her. But on the flip side, it's like, okay, when has she ever even touched a machete before? You know? It's like, okay, she has a garden and she's a healer and she's learned that stuff, kind of like the woman's side of it, I guess, in this historical setting. But like, she's never been taught how to fight, you know? Like, she was taught how to ride a horse. But I mean, I feel like in that moment she'd be like, okay, well, like, I know what I need to do. But, you know, she kind of would have that disconnect, wouldn't she? Of like, I've never really had to fight before in this way.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point.
But adrenaline, I don't know.
Yeah, true, right? Like in the moment, you get, you know what needs to be done, and I don't know. It's hard to say, but I don't know.
I see that though. There's kind of something there that's a little bit maybe not totally clicking.
Right. Yeah, like just overall with this one, it was okay, but just I wanted more, and I don't know, like I think even if you really love romance, you might still end up being a little bit disappointed with this one just because of it feels like so much of this romance could just be solved with these two like sitting down and like having a for real conversation with one another, and her not just like holding her anger from the past.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it was like him too, like not being able to explain himself.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know there's another scene where his friend, Beto, who I also really liked, I thought he was really funny. When he like got bitten by the vampires or whatever, and he was coming out of his fever, and he's like talking to Nena, and he was like, yeah, like Nestor's a really good guy, but he really sucks at like explaining his feelings and stuff. And I feel like she should have been like, yeah, noticed, you know what I mean?
Right.
And he was bad at like explaining himself and how he felt. But
yeah,
I feel like in some ways he showed it in his own way, and she was just choosing not to acknowledge it.
Yes, I totally see what you mean. Like, and some people like are like that. Like they love in different ways and express themselves in different ways. So maybe they just took time to kind of like come together and see how the other person is. So
yeah, I totally see that. And for me, the other thing, one of the main things where I was like, this didn't even need to happen, was like Nestor was writing letters back and forth to his family, right? And I was like, why didn't anybody just say, oh, by the way, she's alive? I was like, the way I would be so mad at my family if I got back after 9 years and was like, brother, what? None of you guys were going to tell me that she's fine.
Right. That is such a good point. Like that is so frustrating too. And I feel like somebody would have actually told him. Like they would know. They would know how much that was like his best friend, and he would want to know that. And that does not make sense why nobody would have told him in all those years.
No, and I know there was a whole thing of like Nena wasn't like allowed to write him letters or like request that his uncle like say anything about her, but like you'd think that his family would just do it on their own because they know how close the two of them were. Like if I was writing letters to my grandma, I'm sure she would be like, oh, by the way, your friend, yeah, I healed her, she's fine, just so you're aware.
See, it's like the miscommunication trope times like 10, you know, like
yes,
did not need to happen.
Yeah, I'm like, it's not even just you two. It's all of y'all not communicating. I'm like, you guys couldn't write a sentence in a letter about this woman? Like,
right. So frustrating.
That was so frustrating. Yeah. Oh my God. I totally agree. Well, is there anything else that we want to discuss?
I think that's it for me. Like overall, I don't think this is a bad book at all. Like, and I have seen a lot of like super positive reviews for it, and that totally makes sense. Like, I can see a ton of people really enjoying this one. You have to be careful going into it. Like, get your expectations in line almost with what you're going to get. Like, this is a historical romance with a little bit of horror sprinkled in, not not horror with romance sprinkled in.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, you got to understand what the ratios are there. That's important.
Yeah.
But I also feel like if a lot of people who like romance don't like stuff that's scary. So I feel like if you're, into romance, especially historical romance, and you're also open to like paranormal elements or like some like fairly short, like creepy scenes or like gory scenes, then you're going to be totally fine with this and you'll probably really love it because I really enjoyed it. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but I thought it was really good still.
Yeah.
Or, if you've read Isabel Canas before and you're open to exploring a different genre and going in that it's not going to be the same vibe, then you probably will really like this as well. Yeah. But yeah, just, adjust your expectations a little.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I totally agree with you. Yeah.
All right. Well, it was so nice talking to you.
You too. Thank you so much for having me on and reading this book and discussing with me. Like I said, I definitely will read more from this author in the future, and I love her writing. So, and I would reread The Hacienda for sure because I loved that one. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on, and I'm so excited to see like what else you discuss in the future too.
Yeah, of course. I am really excited to get more into this book club because this is, just the very first live show. So I think it's going to be really cool to see, who else wants to be a co-host in the future and kind of where it ends up going because it's still kind of in its like baby phase right now. But I had an awesome time, talking with you, and thank you so much for coming on and reading this book with me and chatting and everything. It was awesome.
Yes, it's so much fun. Thank you.
Of course. Alrighty. Well, I will see you later, Michaela.
Okay. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.